What if the reason you can't connect with someone like, say, a really closed-off future leader you're trying to mentor, or maybe a colleague who just always gives you these blank stares? What if it isn't because you're doing the wrong things?
Right. What if you're just doing absolutely nothing?
Exactly, doing nothing. Today, we're diving into this genuinely terrifying reality that passivity doesn't just, keep you isolated. It actively builds a fortress around you. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way.
Thanks. And yeah, it is a really profound shift in perspective
Mhm.
because we usually think of alienation as something caused by like a big argument or some profound disagreement.
Like an act of falling out.
Right, exactly. But the source material we're analyzing today argues that the baseline of human interaction is just drift. Like if you aren't intentionally engineering a connection, you are just defaulting to separation.
Yeah, and we have a really fascinating stack of material to get through for you today. We're unpacking a structured curriculum framework simply titled Lesson 5, Relationships. And on the surface, it looks like it's designed as a group learning exercise, right? It's got reflection prompts and reading assignments.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
But beneath that whole classroom format, it's actually an incredibly sharp and honestly kind of unsentimental diagnostic tool. It's for anyone who is just trying to bridge the gap with another human being.
So the mission of our deep dive today is to extract those core frameworks and help you audit your own relationship building strategies. We want to look at where we're all maybe relying on passive surface level habits instead of, doing the actual heavy lifting of intentional connection.
Because that heavy lifting is where the real work happens.
It really is. So let's unpack this. The curriculum kind of anchors its entire philosophy on a single metaphor right at the start. There's this quote from John C. Maxwell that says, relationships become better when we tear down the walls that divide us and build bridges that bring us together.
I love that quote.
Yeah, it's great. And from there, the text lays out 3 foundational rules for these bridges. They take effort, they bring people together, and they make life better.
And that first rule, the idea that bridges take effort, that's really the hinge for everything else in the lesson.
Mm.
The framework presents human relationships as a conscious daily choice. So the main diagnostic question it asks you is, am I building walls or bridges?
I mean, I have to pause right there and push back on that premise a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because if we think about a physical bridge, right, it's never built by accident. You need blueprints, steel, a crew, constant maintenance. I completely agree that takes effort. But framing walls as this inherently negative thing that must be torn down, that feels a bit absolute to me.
You mean like boundaries?
Yes, exactly. Aren't walls sometimes necessary? Like if I'm working with a group of youth or just managing my own personal life, I need boundaries. I don't want to build a bridge to absolutely everyone I meet.
No, that reaction makes complete sense, especially today in a culture that, highly values personal boundaries and protecting your peace. But we really need to distinguish between a boundary and what this framework actually defines as a wall.
Okay, how does it define it?
So a boundary is essentially a door. You have a lock, you control the access, you manage your energy, but the capability for connection is still intact. You can open the door when you want to. A wall, in the context of this source, represents total isolation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it is a structure of complete separation where literally no exchange is possible.
So a wall isn't about protecting your energy, it's about opting out of the human experience entirely.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating here is the mechanics of how these walls get built. Because you don't have to intentionally go out and pour concrete to build a wall, you just have to be passive.
Wow, just doing nothing.
Right. Passivity is the default state of self-protection. If you walk into a room, sit in the back, and just wait for people to come to you, you're laying bricks. A bridge, conversely, demands that you leave your safe territory and actively enter someone else's.
That reframes the whole dynamic. Because it means that when you get that infamous, I don't care shrug from a youth you're trying to reach, they haven't necessarily engineered some complex defense mechanism against you.
Probably not now.
They might just be existing in that default state of passivity, and it's on us to initiate the engineering project to reach them, which naturally makes me wonder if bridges require this active, ongoing construction. Where are we getting lazy? Like, where do we think we're building bridges, but we're actually just, I don't know, throwing pebbles into the river?
Well, the material points a very bright, unflinching spotlight directly at our technology, specifically social media.
Oh man, here's where it gets really interesting. Because I think everyone has felt this illusion. You connect with someone online, you follow their stories, you leave a little fire emoji comment here and there, and your brain logs that as a successful social interaction.
Right. You feel like you've done the work. You
You
feel like you
have
have a relationship.
Exactly. But this curriculum calls that out as a complete trap. It says social media is a bridge to initiate a relationship, sure, but it is not a structural foundation where a relationship can actually live.
And the psychology behind that illusion is incredibly potent. When you double tap a photo or send a quick reaction, your brain gets this micro dose of dopamine. It satisfies the biological craving for social interaction, but, and this is the key, it requires zero vulnerability.
Right. It's safe.
Totally safe. There's no risk of rejection, you don't have to read body language, and there's no real-time conversational agility required. The text explicitly warns that this passive approach has very little potential to reward anyone with true depth.
I kind of look at it like exchanging business cards at a networking mixer. Handing someone a card is an introduction. It initiates contact. It's a fine first step. But you wouldn't hand someone a card, shake their hand, and say, great, we're business partners now. Let's split the profits.
No, of course not. You haven't built anything yet.
Right.
That business card analogy is perfect. And the framework actually forces the reader to confront this reality through this self-reflection checklist it provides. It asks you to evaluate how you are meeting people's needs, and it gives you two distinct checkboxes for your actions. The options are literally social media or face-to-face.
Oh, so it doesn't let you hide behind the screen.
It absolutely doesn't.
Right.
By forcing that categorization, the argument becomes super clear. True effort, the kind of effort that can actually withstand the weight of real human complexity, requires the nervous system regulation that only happens face-to-face. You have to be in the room, navigating the awkward pauses, the silences, the real-time reactions.
Okay, so we have to get past the lobby. We have to move beyond the passive swiping, get in the room, and do the hard work. But what does that construction actually look like? Like if I'm sitting right across from someone who is completely shut down, I need more than just a bridge metaphor. I need tools.
Right, you need practical steps, and the source does provide them. It gives this incredibly blunt 10-point checklist called the 10 Things to Know About People.
And blunt is the right word.
Yeah, it's essentially a decoding manual for human behavior. It pairs a stark reality about human nature with a very specific tactical action you need to take to build a bridge based on that reality.
I actually want to read a few of these pairings because they really do not sugarcoat the human condition.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so it says, people are insecure. Give them confidence. People lack direction. Navigate for them. People get emotionally low. Encourage them. People want to be associated with success. Help them win. And then, it drops this one. People are selfish. Speak to their needs first.
Yeah, that specific pairing, selfishness and speaking to their needs, is usually where people just hit the brakes hard.
I definitely hit the brakes. Let's examine that for a second. Calling people inherently selfish and insecure sounds incredibly cynical. Like if I walk into a room to mentor a group of future leaders and my starting assumption is, okay, these kids lack direction, they're insecure, and they only care about themselves, isn't that just a horribly pessimistic baseline? It feels super judgmental.
It does sound cynical, sure, if you view those traits as moral failures. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of developmental psychology and relationship building, it reframes it entirely. This is not cynicism. It's compassionate realism.
Compassionate realism. Okay, walk me through the difference between cynicism and compassionate realism.
Well, a cynic looks at a selfish person, judges them for it, and walks away. A compassionate realist looks at a selfish person and understands that selfishness is almost always a byproduct of scarcity or fear.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. When someone is acting out, when a young person is being defiant or dismissive or completely self-centered, our instinct is usually to judge the behavior and demand that they act better before we engage with them. We tell them to stop being selfish.
Right, we want them to meet us halfway before we start building the bridge. We want them to act like they deserve the bridge first.
Exactly. But the framework flips that script completely. By acknowledging these inherent vulnerabilities up front, your role shifts. You move from being a judge of their behavior to a servant of their underlying need. Defiance is usually just a mask for insecurity.
So if you attack the defiant.
You're just banging your head against their wall. But if you provide confidence, if you speak to their underlying need to feel competent and safe, you bypass the wall entirely.
Wow. So what does this all mean in practice? It means resistance is not a stock sign, it's a diagnostic indicator.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like if someone is being incredibly self-centered, you don't lecture them on altruism. You say, okay, their need for self-preservation is in overdrive right now. Let me speak to their needs first. You fulfill the immediate psychological deficit, which lowers their defenses and allows the bridge to actually connect.
And this raises the most important practical question of the entire curriculum. How do we actually deliver that confidence? How do we provide hope or navigate for someone without coming across as condescending or preachy?
Because nobody wants a lecture. We need a delivery mechanism. And the framework provides a surprisingly simple one: asking for their story. It argues that the absolute best way to deliver personal attention and bridge that gap is to just ask people to share their story with you.
We so often underestimate the power of a personal narrative. A story isn't just, a timeline of events. It contains a person's interests, their unrealized dreams, their deep disappointments, their unique identity. When you ask for it, you aren't just making small talk. You are inviting them to exist fully in your presence.
The curriculum breaks this process down into this brilliant three-step escalation. It outlines how listening actively creates the bridge, moving through three distinct levels of making someone feel special. And I want to spend some time here because this is really the blueprint. So, level one, requesting a person's story says you could be special.
Think about the psychology of that request. In a world where most people are just waiting for their turn to speak, asking someone for their story disrupts the pattern. It signals that you are willing to expend your own energy to understand their reality. It's the initial invitation to step onto the bridge.
But the real magic happens at level two. Level two, remembering a person's story says you are special.
And this is where the actual undeniable effort comes in.
Right.
Anyone can ask a polite question. But remembering requires cognitive load. It requires your brain to actively prioritize that person's information.
It's a difference between just hearing words and actually logging them.
Precisely. Retaining that the youth you're mentoring has a sibling they are worried about, or remembering that they failed a math test last Tuesday and are dreading the makeup exam, that proves you were actually listening. Attention is the rarest currency we have. When you spend it on someone by remembering their details, you validate their worth.
Which perfectly sets up the ultimate connection point, level three. Reminding a person of their story or repeating it back to them or to others says, you are special to me.
This is where narrative identity is built. You're taking the data you gathered, storing it safely, and reflecting it back to them as proof of their value.
Imagine how powerful this is for someone who feels entirely invisible. Like, you sit down with a future leader on a Tuesday and just ask about their week. That's level one. The next week, you specifically ask how that difficult conversation with their basketball coach went. That's level two.
Right, you remembered.
Exactly. And then a month later, you're introducing them to another mentor, and you say, this is the student who navigated that incredibly tough situation with their team last month with so much maturity. That is level three. You aren't just telling them they matter, you are providing empirical evidence of their value.
And notice how this transforms the abstract, kind of overwhelming concept of building a relationship into a highly actionable daily habit.
Right.
You don't have to be some charismatic genius to do this. You just have to be a diligent gatherer of their story. You request, you remember, and you remind. The result is that you become a safe harbor. You become special to the person who shared their story with you because you hold it carefully.
So we've audited our effort. We've recognized the junk food nature of passive digital interactions. We've embraced compassionate realism by, looking past the bad behavior to see the hidden needs. And we're using the three-step story framework to build structural integrity.
Right. But there is a crucial final phase to this audit.
Yes, there is. Because once you become proficient at building these deep story-driven bridges, you're going to realize you have a lot of paths open to you. And not all bridges should be crossed.
The curriculum is surprisingly pragmatic about this. It dedicates a significant section to curating your connections. It emphasizes that while bridges make life better, they only do so if they are leading to the right places. The text explicitly empowers the reader with choice, stating that you must decide which friendships to move toward and, critically, which ones you need to move away from.
Because it all comes down to the return on investment. The material lists 6 specific benefits of positive relationships. It says positive connections encourage you to grow and succeed, provide support during tough times, increase your sense of purpose, enable collaboration, attract more positive relationships, and create feelings of pleasure and joy.
Let's isolate just one of those for a second. Increasing your sense of purpose. Why does a connection do that? Biologically and psychologically, humans are just wired for shared meaning. When you are connected to someone who encourages your growth, your individual actions suddenly have a communal impact.
That makes total
Your
sense.
successes are celebrated, your failures are buffered by them. That shared reality is the literal definition of purpose.
That list of 6 benefits is basically a health inspection for your bridges. If you look at a relationship, maybe an old friendship or a professional dynamic, and it is not yielding growth, support, or joy, then the structural integrity is compromised. And this is where the framework gets really tough. What do we do about the bridges that are actively harmful?
The material is uncompromising here. It asserts that knowing how to maximize the positive relationships is only half the equation. Minimizing the negative ones is equally key to a satisfying life.
This is the hard choice, right? We spend so much time talking about how to connect, we rarely talk about the mechanics of walking away.
But bridges allow you to go to those who are healthy for you, and they also give you a path to walk away from toxicity. And the underlying mechanism here is the reality of finite energy. You cannot build a bridge to everywhere.
You just don't have the materials.
Right. Every ounce of emotional labor you pour into a draining, toxic relationship is energy stolen from a youth who really needs your presence, or a family member who needs your attention.
If you're in a leadership or mentorship role, this is a dual lesson. First, you have to model this boundary setting. You have to teach the people looking up to you how to identify those 6 positive traits so they can recognize when a relationship isn't serving them and give them permission to walk away from bad influences. But secondly, you have to audit your own emotional bank account. If a dynamic is purely draining, you have the responsibility to protect your own space. You can't pour from an empty cup.
By identifying what a positive relationship looks like, the contrast of a toxic one becomes glaringly obvious. You stop making excuses for the people who constantly tear down your energy.
So let's look at the complete architecture we've built today through this material. We started by confronting the uncomfortable truth that doing nothing is actually an active choice to build a wall of isolation.
A tough pill to swallow, but true.
Very true. We realized that handing out social media likes is just exchanging business cards, not doing the real work. We leaned into compassionate realism, understanding that behind every selfish or insecure act is a fundamental human need waiting to be met. We broke down the immense power of the 3-step story process: request, remember, and remind. And finally, we gave ourselves permission to audit our bridges, moving aggressively toward growth and walking away from toxicity.
It is an incredibly cohesive framework. And the curriculum does something very smart at the very end. After all this complex analysis of human nature, it distills everything into a single, personal commitment prompt. It asks the reader to internalize this statement: today, I will be the friend to others that I would like to have myself.
Today, I will be the friend to others that I would like to have myself.
I love that. It completely strips away the external focus. You can't control how the other person reacts, but you have total control over the engineering you bring to the table.
It acts as the ultimate mirror. Like, would I want a mentor who only engages with me passively? Would I want a friend who gets frustrated with my bad days instead of trying to understand the insecurity behind them? If the answer is no, then you know exactly where your own bridge needs structural repair.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to carry into your day. Think back to that 10-point checklist of human needs we discussed. The need for confidence, the need for hope, the need for someone to just listen, or the need for navigation when things are overwhelming.
They're also universal. They really are. So look closely at the people in your life right now. Whether it's a future leader you're trying to guide, a colleague at work, or a family member sitting across the dinner table, which person in your orbit is silently broadcasting one of those exact needs right now? And more importantly, what specific, deliberate bridge are you going to choose to build tomorrow to meet them exactly where they are?